So I'm taking a rewind back to 2016. I love looking at these old games, and this is the very first final of the Chess.com Speed Chess Championship. And it wasn't even called the SCC back then, it was called the Grandmaster Blitz Battle, and no surprises who ended up in the final. We had Hikaru versus Magnus. But back in the 2010s, Magnus really had Hikaru's number. Hikaru just could not beat him. Even when he got great positions, Magnus just would defend so diligently. And this game is another great example. Nakamura on top still gets wrecked in this crazy endgame. Wait till you see the climax. So this is Blitz chess here. Let's check it out. So Hikaru kicks off with d4. Now the Chess.com developers have been busy. Look at these pieces, right? They've got that kind of whoosh thing going on. Now the knight develops here, and watch the black bishop. Whoosh, all the way out. Okay, it's kind of hard not to say whoosh when the pieces come out. Pretty cool what they've done here. And wait till you see the king castle. So we get this e3 solid line against the Nimzo Indian. You can take here, shatter the pawn structure, but it's not considered very good for black to give up that bishop pair in this particular position so prematurely. So instead castles. Look at those pieces swap over. Look at that one. Pretty cool, I think. So knight e2 now played, supports the other one. Excuse me. And now we see rook e8, and this is a weird looking move, not developing the queen side, but the point is after a3, you've given this bishop a retreat square. Again, that does look a bit weird on the surface of it, but okay, you're not putting the bishop in front of pawns, in front of pieces, so it helps black then activate the position. We get g3, preparing to fianchetto, d5 from Magnus, an exchange, pawn recaptures, this bishop fianchettos, and now another strange move if you don't know the systems, but Carlsen knows what he's doing, so he pushes this rook's pawn, preparing to then bring this knight here, develop it there, support a later c5 potentially, and in the future we see this pawn run down, clamp on these two. So castle's now played from Hikaru, we get knight a6, knight f4 pressures that central pawn. It was defended with c6, and there could also be ideas for this knight to reroute into d3 and then maybe look at one of these squares. I mean, always think about a knight move. When you stick it on a square, what's its next hops? You have to think about the circuits. f3 now played. Really interesting idea from Nakamura. So he's actually got an idea here to push on with g4. Even though it looks like he might be playing for e4, but it's an aggressive kingside attacking move. And now Magnus goes c5, and this is because the f3 move's just been played, blocks this bishop, there's no longer so much pressure on d5, so he can get away with this move. We get king h1, prophylactic move, taking the king off this diagonal. That word prophylaxis, by the way, I looked it up, it's from Greek originally, with phalanx meaning to guard. I'm probably not saying that right, phalanx, but that's where the word then comes from, to guard against future threats that could come to pass. So we get knight c7 now played, possibly going on a journey to e6 or b5 as we see in the game. We get g4 now from Hikaru, and this is the aggressive kind of intention I was talking about. And the knight remaneuver drawn on the board is also what he's aiming for. So h6 from Magnus keeps an eye on the g5 push. This knight now hops back, and we get pawn b6, preparing to develop that light squared bishop. Now this bishop develops to d2, we get bishop d6, so Magnus finally bouncing that one back into the game, pressuring this piece, and knight g3. Hikaru carrying on with his attack. Pawn a4 from Magnus, so he's clamping on the queen side and also stopping queen b3 because in a moment he wants knight b5. So rook c1 was played and now knight b5. And the knight looks kind of weird there, but it's actually very annoying. So there's a threat here to take. After the pawn recaptures, will you then recapture with the knight? And if you retreat with the white knight to defend the threat, okay, it's playable, but a bit passive. You've just come from that direction. So what does Hikaru do? Well, he takes to alleviate the pressure. Pawn recaptures, and now he plays this queen out onto the c2 square, again looking in the direction of the king, also putting pressure here. And Magnus now plays a committal move, gives up the bishop pair, not forced, but not a bad move either. The pawn recaptures, and so for giving up his bishops, he shattered the pawns, but also released the passed d-pawn in future, and his knight now hops to d4 with tempo against the queen, and then to b3 with tempo against the rook. So we can see the idea of Magnus giving up the bishops, big initiative he's now generated. So bishop a6 played, the initiative continues, the rook attacked. If you come to the e-file, not so good, because this one can be captured. Yes, you can take here with check, queen goes, rook takes, but then the queen invades, and you're hitting 2 points here. There's tactical problems. So coming back here, after bishop a6, hitting this rook, it slides over to g1, and now we get bishop e2 from Magnus. Not the most precise move, actually. So where are we? Sorry, after bishop a6. So the best was actually to take this knight, rook recaptures, and then go queen c7. Just pressuring this pawn, which is really hard to defend. But okay, Magnus goes bishop e2. They're making decisions under time pressure. We get knight captures, rook takes, looks really nice invading, but after bishop e1, saving that one, well, Magnus now doesn't find the right continuation. Best was something like queen d6, again pressuring this pawn, maybe preparing to bring the other rook, but we see pawn d4, very logical idea, but here's the problem. Bishop f1 kicks the rook, and then bishop c4, using this complex that you just opened up when you pushed d4. And now Magnus is in trouble, because he goes knight e8, compounding his problems here with the idea of coming into d6 to attack this bishop, then maybe push c4, but bang, g5. Hikaru just crashes through with this attack, and this is getting really dangerous, because after captures, rook recaptures, look at the pressure now on the black king. You've got the bishop bearing down on this pawn. Excuse me, losing my voice this evening. You've got the bishop bearing down on this pawn and king, so queen g6 is a threat, and there's ideas of attacking down the h-file as well, maybe something like this, plus this bishop can bounce to h4, and after knight d6, here Magnus does not make his defensive task easier. You can see that eval bar go, but Hikaru was critical of his next move. He wished that he'd played bishop d5, which is the top move. You just save that bishop, hit the rook. If you save it with something like this, well, then there's rook h5, threatening mate. You can't go g6, the queen would just take. That pawn's actually pinned. So there's big problems here for black. Anyway, running back here, we didn't see bishop d5. Hikaru goes bishop h4 immediately, so threatening to take here with check, win the queen. That was the thumbnail one. What does Magnus do? Well, this is where he just unleashes the queen sack. He didn't have a lot of choice, to be honest. So bang, he takes on c4. The rook crashes through on g7 with check. They've got this new kind of funky thing going on when you check the king as well. And now, after king takes, Hikaru goes really badly wrong. He rushes the position, he takes that queen. He should check first. And then the king actually has to step to f8. If it steps to the h-file, the problem is you capture and then queen f5. And you're threatening that mate in two different ways, you just can't stop it. So coming back here, after this check here, the king would have to go to f8, and then again you can bring the queen down. Now you're actually threatening to mate that king because the bishop is blocking the square out. So you couldn't save the queen, or you simply get mated, something like this. So here you'd have to go king e8, best move, but then check, the king goes, you check here, queen blocks, this is the top line, but then you can check from d5. And if the knight blocks or whatever the king does, you're picking up the rook in the corner. Huge material for white. But Hikaru, he rushes to take that queen on d8, and suddenly, after rook recaptures, queen f5, there's rook d6. And the defense now for Magnus is just way easier, because after check, you block with the rook. Yes, there's an exchange, pawn recaptures, but now the computer is just giving this a draw. Because even though you can give this king the runaround and even pick up a knight, the big problem is this passed d-pawn, which Magnus now starts running. And it gives such huge counterplay that actually this is just a draw if the white queen can keep checking that black king. But that's a big if, because what Magnus wants to do now is run it round to the queen side where it can find some cover, you know, over this way. And the pawn is just one step away from promoting, so white has to keep checking. We get the check, the king goes, and now instantly Hikaru goes wrong. So apparently he should check from e8 or c8 and he's okay. Really difficult to see this stuff. He checks from g8, bang, eval bar goes, hates it. Why? Because now Magnus starts running this king over to the queen side and the checks just run out. It reaches a5, what do? A new queen is made. The knight even covers this pawn. A few more checks thrown in, but it's just driving the king down the board, and here we see resignation. You cannot stop that king from running away in one manner or the other. Then the pieces will block, and you know, there's just overwhelming material for black. So Magnus, so slippery, he actually comes out on top and went on to win this match. If you want to see another epic game between these two players, then check out the video on screen, and thanks very much for watching.